A loving mother of two brutally stabbed in her own home. But the shocking twist? Her boyfriend claims she did it to herself. What really happened to Amadea McDermott on that fateful day in Coolock? And why did Martin Hayes, a social worker, call an ambulance after allegedly committing such a heinous act? In today's episode of our true crime series, we'll uncover the chilling details of a case that has left a community reeling and a family desperate for answers. A mother of two, Amadea McDermott, 27, lived at her home in Rathvale Drive, Ayrfield, Coolock. She had a boyfriend named Martin Hayes, who was 34 years old. He was a social worker. Amadea had sisters, Euphrasia and Eucharia. Amadea was described as a kind, caring, funny, loving, beautiful, and amazing mother, daughter, sister, auntie, and friend. Amadea McDermott and her sister Euphrasia had booked a spray tan appointment at a local salon, preparing for a family christening. As Amadea undressed in the spray tent, beauty therapist Dawn Thielen was startled by the extensive bruising on her body. This was a week to 20th of July. Thielen recounted her testimony in the Central Criminal Court, stating she typically avoided commenting on clients' appearances. However, the severity of Amadea's bruising prompted an involuntary reaction. "What happened to you?" Amadea attributed the injuries to her 4-year-old son's playful jumping. Yet, Thielen remained skeptical, observing old yellowish bruises on Amadea's chest and fresh bruising on her upper and lower back. The disparity between Amadea's explanation and the severity of the injuries raised concerns. Thielen's testimony provided a painful glimpse into Amadea's life, revealing disturbing signs of potential abuse mere days before her tragic demise. Following Amadea's spray tan session, Dawn Thielen expressed concern to Euphrasia about Amadea's well-being, citing the alarming bruises. Euphrasia's cryptic response, "We are not quite sure what is going on," only heightened Thielen's unease. Later that day, Amadea's childhood friend, Jane Deacon, arrived to apply makeup for her niece's christening. Initially, Amadea seemed subdued, but as they began, Deacon noticed a black eye. Amadea confided in Deacon, revealing her toxic relationship with partner Martin Hayes. Overcome with emotion, Amadea shared her conflicted feelings, wishing Hayes would leave, yet still loving him. Deacon, shocked by this revelation, had been unaware of her friend's ordeal. But something more than a black eye and yellowish bruises was going to happen to Amadea days later. In the early hours of July 20th, emergency services rushed to Amadea's Coolock apartment on Rathvale Drive after Martin Hayes' frantic calls. Hayes, dressed in a white vest and underpants, flagged down the ambulance, revealing he and Amadea had argued and she threatened self-harm. He also contacted Amadea's sister, who was asleep at the time. Paramedic Keith Markey entered the apartment to find Amadea lying on her back in the living room kitchen doorway. Markey and his team performed chest compressions when they couldn't find a pulse. They noted and dressed a severe stab wound to Amadea's abdomen, which caused significant internal bleeding. Amadea's mother vehemently disputed the notion of self-inflicted harm, stating, "I will not accept that. Never." Her sister, Euphrasia, corroborated this, testifying that Amadea was planning for the future just a week before her death, showing no signs of depression. Euphrasia's account contradicted Hayes' initial claim, casting doubt on his narrative. The testimony of Amadea's loved ones painted a picture of a woman with a future ahead, not one contemplating harm. When Hayes was brought in for questioning, he described the events leading up to Amadea's injury, admitting that they had both used vodka and cocaine. Hayes claimed Amadea became agitated once the cocaine ran out, sparking a heated argument. He withdrew to the bedroom, characterizing their relationship as tempestuous and prone to intense disputes. Hayes alleged Amadea entered the bedroom, threatening self-harm with a knife, a behavior he claimed wasn't unusual. He admitted not taking her threats seriously, having witnessed similar incidents before. Moments later, Hayes said he heard a disturbing sound and found Amadea in the living area with a stomach wound. He promptly called 9999 following the operator's instructions to apply pressure with a towel. Garda Flynn observed Hayes' visibly intoxicated state, noting the lingering effects of alcohol and drugs consumed earlier that night. Hayes' account, though detailed, raised questions about his credibility and the true events surrounding Amadea's fatal injury. Eucharia McDermott's quiet morning was shattered when her sister Euphrasia's panic-struck cry echoed from downstairs. "Quick, quick, it's Amadea. She's gone into cardiac arrest." In an instant, Eucharia rushed out, still in her pajamas, and jumped into Euphrasia's car. Moments earlier, Martin Hayes had phoned Euphrasia, urging her to come quickly, citing Amadea's cardiac arrest. Euphrasia swiftly alerted their family, setting off a chaotic chain of events. Upon arriving at Amadea's apartment, Eucharia leapt from the moving car and burst inside, demanding to know her sister's whereabouts. Hayes sat calmly on a bed amidst a chaotic scene. Shattered glass and scattered clothes littered the floor. Eucharia's distress intensified as she glimpsed paramedics tending to Amadea in another room. She was barred from entering, forced to endure the agonizing wait. Later, learning of Amadea's fatal stab wound, Eucharia revealed to Gardaí a dark history of domestic abuse in her sister's relationship, alleging Hayes' past physical violence against Amadea. That fateful day would forever be etched in Eucharia's memory as the worst of her life, a painful testament to the devastating consequences of domestic violence. Eucharia's world shattered when she learned of her sister Amadea's passing at Beaumont Hospital. Overwhelmed, she rushed out of the resuscitation room, only to find Martin Hayes, Amadea's partner, smirking at the door. Eucharia's grief turned to anger, and she confronted Hayes, telling him he shouldn't be there. The situation escalated, with Hayes insulting her and a physical altercation ensuing. Euphrasia, Amadea's other sister, arrived at the hospital to find Hayes laughing and smirking, seemingly unfazed by the tragedy. The stark contrast between Hayes' demeanor and the family's grief only deepened their suspicions. In the aftermath, Eucharia took 3 phones from Amadea's apartment, which would later become crucial evidence. 2 years later, in November 2019, she handed them over to the authorities, along with emailed screenshots of text messages between Amadea and Hayes. These messages revealed a disturbing dynamic, with Amadea telling Hayes she was sick of his accusations and his sick thoughts, and expressing frustration with his refusal to admit needing help. Eucharia's statement to the police confirmed what the text messages suggested. Amadea's relationship with Hayes was full of conflict, often escalating into screaming matches when alcohol was involved. This troubling picture would become vital in understanding the events surrounding Amadea's tragic death. Detective Niall Gibbs invited Martin Hayes to Coolock Garda Station on July 21, 2017, to provide a statement regarding Amadea's sudden passing. Hayes cooperated, sharing details of his relationship and events leading up to the tragedy. Hayes revealed he worked as a gravedigger at Mount Jerome Cemetery for nearly 7 years and had been in a decade-long relationship with Amadea, whom he met on Bebo. Together, they had 2 children. Hayes described their seemingly ordinary evening, watching Love Island and drinking vodka on July 19th. However, Hayes admitted the night took a darker turn when they ran out of alcohol, sparking a heated argument. He confessed to taking cocaine with Amadea, and their familiar pattern of jealousy and suspicion resurfaced as they scrutinized each other's phones. Hayes's statement painted a complex picture of a troubled relationship marred by substance abuse and possessiveness. His account would be scrutinized as investigators sought to unravel the truth, surrounding Amadea's tragic death. Martin Hayes recounted the fateful night's events, revealing a volatile argument with Amadea. He claimed to have told her he was leaving, prompting her to slap him, which he reciprocated. The situation escalated as Amadea retrieved a knife from the kitchen. Hayes alleged he dismissed Amadea's threats, saying, "I don't give a fuck anymore, I'm going," before retiring to bed. However, Amadea stood at the bedroom door, knife in hand, prompting Hayes to arm himself with a machete. In a tense standoff, Hayes claimed Amadea warned him he'd lose the best thing in his life. He rebuffed her, and Amadea returned to the sitting room. Moments later, Hayes witnessed a disturbing scene. Amadea's leg visible from the doorway, blood pooling on the floor. Hayes's account led him to call 112, seeking paramedic assistance. Amadea was rushed to the hospital, her fate tragically sealed. Hayes's narrative painted a picture of a tumultuous relationship marked by violence and desperation. However, prosecutors later disputed this account, labeling it a deceitful fabrication that took 6 years to unravel. Senior counsel Sean Gillane presented a contrasting narrative, highlighting the ordinary, peaceful atmosphere of Amadea's home on the evening of her death. He emphasized that Amadea feared death, not sought it. Here's why they believed he wasn't truthful about everything. Neve Higgins, a key witness, revealed a startling contradiction to Martin Hayes' account of Amadea's fatal night. Higgins began a relationship with Hayes in September 2018, and on Christmas Eve, Hayes' emotions unraveled after consuming cocaine and alcohol. As Higgins wrapped presents for her daughter, Hayes became agitated, unable to bear the thought of not seeing his own children. He confided in Higgins about Amadea's death, sharing a drastically different version of events than his initial statement. Hayes claimed he discovered flirty messages between Amadea and a relative on her phone, fueling his suspicion and anger. He alleged a heated confrontation ensued, with Amadea grabbing a knife in self-defense. Hayes' disturbing admission to Higgins revealed a chilling sequence of events. He chased Amadea, grasping for her phone, and in the struggle held the knife in her hands, ultimately plunging it into her stomach. Higgins' testimony exposed Hayes' conflicting narratives, raising questions about his credibility and the true circumstances surrounding Amadea's tragic death. The revelation ended Higgins' relationship with Hayes that same night. Under cross-examination, Neve Higgins clarified Martin Hayes' shocking admission, stating he stood behind Amadea and used his hands to guide hers, forcing the knife into her stomach. Higgins explained Amadea held the knife in self-defense. Defense counsel Ronan Monroe questioned Higgins' choice of words, particularly help, which seemed incongruous with the violent act. Higgins maintained Hayes' actions were aggressive, not supportive. Monroe suggested Higgins was fabricating her account, but she firmly denied this. As a witness and victim of Hayes' abuse, Higgins insisted she was telling the truth. The defense counsel highlighted inconsistencies between Higgins' 2020 and 2023 statements to Gardaí. Higgins attributed the omission in her initial statement to fear. Monroe's probing revealed the complexity of Higgins' experience with Hayes, who shifted from emotional vulnerability to abusive behavior that night. Higgins' testimony remained steadfast, despite intense scrutiny. Neve Higgins acknowledged making her second statement to Gardaí on May 18th, potentially influencing Martin Hayes' bail decision. Defense counsel Ronan Monroe suggested her statement could have blocked his bail by alleging Hayes confessed to murder. Hayes vehemently denied Higgins' claims, stating she lied and harbored hatred towards him. He questioned the plausibility of Higgins remaining in a relationship with someone who confessed to murder. Hayes emphasized that Amadea's name wasn't mentioned on Christmas Eve, contradicting Higgins' testimony. This stark contradiction raised questions about credibility and motivations. The conflicting accounts created a complex narrative, leaving the court to ponder the truth. Hayes's denial and Higgins' resolve sparked tension, highlighting the gravity of the allegations. Social worker Kiara Lumsden testified about her August 25, 2017, meeting with Martin Hayes in Coolock. Hayes shared disturbing allegations, discovering evidence on Amadea's WhatsApp, suggesting an incestuous relationship with a relative. Hayes claimed their argument began after this discovery, leading him to walk away temporarily. Upon returning, he found Amadea on the floor with a puncture wound and called an ambulance. Hayes described their relationship as conflict-ridden, with occasional violence from Amadea, which he reciprocated. Alcohol consumption exacerbated these incidents. Additionally, Hayes admitted installing hidden tracking software on Amadea's phone, monitoring her contacts, calls, messages, and social media without her knowledge. Detective Anthony Maloney explained that this app remained undetectable to Amadea, highlighting Hayes' invasive surveillance. Hayes' admissions revealed a troubled dynamic, marked by mistrust, violence, and control. The hidden app intensified concerns about Hayes' intentions and behavior. Retired state pathologist Dr. Marie Cassidy presented her expert findings to the jury. She revealed that Amadea's fatal injury could be consistent with self-harm. However, Dr. Cassidy also noted the presence of fresh, blunt force traumas on Amadea's head and face. The investigation uncovered a potential weapon, a knife retrieved from the living area. Dr. Cassidy suggested this knife could have inflicted the fatal wound. A DNA match was found between Amadea and a small amount of blood on the knife. Notably, no DNA from Martin Hayes was detected on the knife. Initially, the Garda investigation began as a sudden death inquiry in 2017, categorized as a suspicious death. The case remained in this status until the end of 2018. The McDermott family later brought forward new information, prompting an upgrade to a homicide investigation. The timeline of events unfolded as follows. Hayes was first arrested on suspicion of murder on October 8, 2020, and released the next day. He was rearrested on April 4, 2022, and subsequently charged with Amadea's murder. Dr. Cassidy's testimony highlighted the complexities of the case, with conflicting evidence and narratives raising questions about Hayes's involvement in Amadea's tragic death. The trial sought to unravel the truth surrounding the events of that fateful night. Martin Hayes took the stand in his own defense, 2 weeks into his trial. He described Amadea as a devoted mother, but acknowledged their relationship was toxic, particularly when alcohol and drugs were involved. Hayes admitted to regular substance abuse with Amadea, consuming vodka, cocaine, and cannabis. Hayes's counsel noted that toxic was a buzzword, and Hayes clarified, "I didn't trust her, and she didn't trust me." The mistrust stemmed from Amadea's past relationship with Hayes's best friend during her pregnancy with their first child. Despite reuniting, the trust issues persisted. Hayes revealed they shared passwords for social media accounts, but Amadea still suspected him of infidelity. He admitted to tracking Amadea's phone, monitoring her text messages due to his lingering distrust. When asked if this was unusual, Hayes matter-of-factly replied, "No, I just didn't trust her." Hayes' testimony painted a picture of a troubled relationship marred by substance abuse, mistrust, and possessiveness. His defense sought to contextualize the complexities of their dynamic, potentially influencing the jury's understanding of the events surrounding Amadea's tragic death. Martin Hayes continued his testimony, acknowledging Amadea's occasional agitation when consuming alcohol, typically manifesting in verbal insults. He emphatically denied stabbing Amadea, asserting he did everything to save her that night. Hayes also refuted Neve Higgins' claim that he confessed to stabbing Amadea. Regarding his conversation with Higgins, Hayes clarified that he discussed his relationship with Amadea and her tragic death, but never admitted to stabbing her. When asked directly, Hayes replied, "Ah, no." Concluding his testimony, Hayes reiterated his innocence and affection for Amadea, emphasizing her exceptional parenting. His final statement to the jury was, "She was a brilliant mother. She really was, and I didn't do this." Prosecutor Sean Gillane began his cross-examination of Martin Hayes, highlighting the contradictory descriptions of his relationships with Amadea and Neve Higgins. Both were labeled toxic, yet Hayes admitted trusting Higgins, distinguishing the dynamics. Gillane pressed Hayes on his initial statement to Gardaí, where he claimed everything was fine until Amadea lost her marbles when the alcohol ran out. Hayes maintained Amadea transformed into a different person during these episodes. Gillane skeptically portrayed Hayes as a self-proclaimed peacekeeper, retreating to the bedroom during arguments, implying Hayes positioned himself as the victim and Amadea as the aggressor. Hayes reaffirmed this account, stating, "That's the truth." The prosecutor suggested Hayes' mask had slipped when allegedly confessing to Higgins about Amadea's murder. Hayes firmly denied this, asserting, "I'm not going to confess to something I didn't do." Prosecutor Sean Gillane continued questioning Martin Hayes, highlighting the stark contrast between Amadea's ordinary text conversation with Deacon and her subsequent violent death. Hayes attributed Amadea's behavior to her Jekyll and Hyde personality. Gillane challenged Hayes' fixation on Amadea's alleged relationship with a relative, suggesting it was a demented fixation and invention. Hayes denied this, claiming Amadea confessed to the relationship. Gillane further revealed Amadea's concerns about Hayes' mental state, urging him to seek help. Hayes responded by describing a physical altercation, admitting to throwing Amadea into an L-shaped sofa. He justified his actions, stating, "If someone is hitting me, I'll hit them back. I've every right to." In his closing address, defense counsel Ronan Monroe portrayed Hayes as distasteful but unguarded. Monroe emphasized Hayes' willingness to cooperate with authorities and seek help on the night of Amadea's death, citing this as evidence of his innocence. Monroe acknowledged Hayes' history of violence and insensitive behavior, but suggested this didn't necessarily imply guilt. He highlighted Amadea's struggles with depression, positing that her relationship with Hayes, coupled with substance abuse, may have contributed to her emotional state. Monroe's closing remarks aimed to humanize Hayes and highlight the complexities of the tumultuous relationship, leaving the jury to ponder the truth surrounding Amadea's tragic death. Martin Hayes was sentenced to 12 years and 6 months in prison by Justice Paul McDermott at the Central Criminal Court. The sentencing followed Hayes' conviction for the fatal stabbing of his partner, Amadea McDermott, in July 2017. Justice McDermott emphasized Hayes' history of violence and aggression toward Amadea, highlighting the pattern of abuse that preceded the tragic event. The judge deemed the killing an act of domestic violence, an aggravating factor that contributed to the severity of the sentence. This designation acknowledges the exploitative and vulnerable nature of domestic relationships. Furthermore, Justice McDermott rejected the defense's submission that the killing was accidental or quasi-accidental. Outside the courtroom, Eucharia, Amadea's sister, expressed relief and outrage. She condemned Martin Hayes' testimony as lie after lie for falsely claiming Amadea stabbed herself. Eucharia emphasized Hayes showed no remorse for taking her sister's life. Despite the conviction, Eucharia acknowledged the family's irreparable loss. However, she found solace in knowing Hayes' sentencing would protect other women from his abuse. Eucharia's statement turned into a powerful call to action, urging Ireland to confront coercive control and domestic abuse. She advocated for stricter laws to protect victims, citing the current legislation as too lenient. Her words, though painful, highlighted the lasting impact of domestic violence. For every wound, there is a scar, and every scar tells a story. Eucharia's plea echoed the family's desire to honor Amadea's memory by driving change and safeguarding others from suffering similar tragedies. During the sentencing hearing, emotions ran high as members of Amadea's family addressed the court, sharing powerful and touching statements. One of Amadea's sisters directly confronted Martin Hayes, her voice filled with anguish and outrage. "You are a coward, an active predator, and an abuser of women," she exclaimed. "You hide behind your insecurities through your fists." Olivia Heffernan, Amadea's eldest sister, delivered a heart-wrenching statement, asserting that Martin Hayes stole her sister's life. She confidently disputed Hayes' suggestion that Amadea would take her own life, emphasizing Amadea's profound love for her family and children. Heffernan revealed that Amadea was under Hayes's coercive control, and the extent of her sister's bruising in the hospital left her shaken. Addressing Hayes, she affirmed her initial suspicions. "My instincts and gut feelings were 100% right about you." The discovery of a hidden, untraceable tracker on Amadea's phone, planted by Hayes, shocked Heffernan. She condemned Hayes as an active predator, luring and waiting for his next prey to abuse. Heffernan also accused Hayes of fabricating lies against the McDermott family, including false accusations of incest. Raising her voice, Heffernan addressed victims of domestic abuse worldwide. "Stand up and be heard. Don't hide behind the fists of cowards." She emphasized that if Amadea had sought help, she would still be alive today. Heffernan expressed outrage over Hayes's continued disrespect for Amadea, even accessing her Instagram account after her death. "How deranged are you?" she asked, her words echoing the family's pain and determination to honor Amadea's memory by advocating against domestic abuse. Justice McDermott delivered his verdict, scrutinizing Martin Hayes' conflicting accounts of the events leading to the fatal row. The judge concluded that Hayes's motivation stemmed from an untrue and unfounded belief in Amadea McDermott's involvement in an incestuous relationship, which he deemed an obsession. Hayes was identified as the aggressor on the night, and the judge highlighted several aggravating features. These included a clear history of violence against Amadea, establishing a pattern of abuse. Justice McDermott emphasized that the killing constituted an act of domestic violence, inherently aggravating due to its exploitative nature. Furthermore, the infliction of the stab wound was deemed highly reckless. The judge also addressed Hayes's substance abuse, rejecting it as a mitigating factor. Instead, he noted that violence and aggression toward Amadea when intoxicated were consistent with Hayes' character, exacerbating his culpability. These findings formed the basis of the judge's sentencing decision, highlighting the gravity of Hayes' crimes and the need to hold perpetrators of domestic violence accountable. Justice McDermott pointed out Martin Hayes' disturbing behavior, including the creation of menacing videos where he confronted Amadea McDermott with false incest allegations. One video in particular showed Amadea McDermott clearly in fear, underscoring Hayes' intimidating nature. The judge also criticized Hayes' demeanor during the trial, revealing his underlying violent disposition. He noted Hayes' language and actions were violent, stating it was rare to witness such explicit evidence of a defendant's true character. In sentencing, the judge considered Hayes' limited mitigating factors, including his work record as a gravedigger and attempts to address drug abuse issues. However, these were vastly outweighed by the severity of his crimes. The judge set a headline sentence of 14 years, ultimately imposing a sentence of 12 years and 6 months, with no portion suspended. The sentence was backdated to April 4, 2022, when Hayes first entered custody. As we close this heartbreaking chapter of Amadea McDermott's story, one thing remains clear. The devastating consequences of domestic violence are far-reaching. Despite the efforts of her family to uncover the truth, Amadea's tragic death serves as a painful reminder of the dangers of coercive control, violence, and manipulation. The fight for justice and change continues as we honor Amadea's memory by standing up for the countless others who face similar struggles in silence. If this story has left you shaken, we encourage you to share it to help raise awareness about domestic abuse and the need for stronger protection for victims. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a chilling true crime story like this one. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe. Thank you for watching.